There are millions of podcasts being done all over the world that take on the personalities of their creator. Some bring in thousands of listeners each week. Some bring in large amounts of revenue, while others entertain millions and help sell products. If you're like many podcasters, you want to reach your maximum potential. But how? How do you make your podcast stand out from all the rest? Join Dr. Barrett Matthews as he talks to experts who are doing it on The Productive Podcaster. And hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Productive Podcaster. I am Dr. Barrett Matthews, and I want to welcome you. We're going to have some fun today. We're going to have some fun. The Productive Podcaster is a podcast for podcasters. It's to help you to be the most productive you can be. And productive can be a relative term. It can mean that you have a lot of listeners. It can be you have a lot of followers. It can be you have a lot of viewers. It can be that you have more people who are buying your products or service. It could be that you're helping people. Whatever you deem productive to be, we want to help you to get there by bringing some information, some knowledge to you to help you to do that here on the Productive Podcaster. So we start off every episode with one thing, and that's pros and cons.
Pros and cons.
Now, what is pros and cons? Pros and cons is a segment we do to make sure that you know things that every podcaster should know to help them to be the most productive they can be. Because if you don't, it can work against you in a bad, bad way. So the one thing I want to talk to you about today is saving your podcast. That's right, saving your podcast. Why is this so important? Because if you don't save it in the right format, it could be torture for you. Think about all the work that you put in getting your podcast up. Think about the guests that you had to get to be on. Think about the time you had to put in formatting, writing out how you wanted your podcast to go. Think about the sponsors you might have had to put in. Think about all these things, your engineer, your producer, all these things that you had to put in place, your audio, getting everything set up. And when it's all done, you find out it's not saved in the right format. What does that do to you? Pull your hair out? I don't have any hair, but pull your hair out, go crazy. It will drive you nuts. So I'm going to recommend to you that you export your settings and in your export settings rather, that you look for MP3 as the file extension and 192 kilobytes per second, a bit rate. That's what I'm suggesting. I'm not an expert. I'm not trying to be one. I don't play one on TV either. But that's just my suggestion. And you can look up more information on how to save it in the right format. But I'm just saying, if you don't save it in the right format, I mean, think about it. Think about it when you've done some type of file or something a document, and it's saved in the wrong format. And you send it to someone and they can't open it, or vice versa. Someone sends you something and it wasn't put in the right format and you can't open it. You know that frustration? Imagine if that's the podcast that you just worked on now. What does that do for you? What does that do for the people who want to hear your podcast? What type of frustration? So I'm just saying, make sure that you're on point with this. Make sure that you put some time, some effort into making sure, into seeing that it's done the way it should be done, saved in the right format. Check it. That's right. Check it. Check behind yourself. Just don't post stuff willy-nilly and think it's done. You're putting out a professional product. So when you're putting that professional product out, you want to make sure that it's done right. You want to see that when people listen to your podcast, they feel confident that you're going to bring top level material to them, not just your content, but how you put it out there to them. They want to make sure it's done and done well. So I recommend to you that you save it in the right format. So that is pros and cons for today. Now, we're going to come back after this break, and I have a very, very special guest that I want to bring on the Productive Podcaster. I love bringing these people on, so stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of the Productive Podcaster.
You've heard the rumblings. You've even thought of starting your own. But how? Everybody knows podcasting is the fastest and best way to get your message out and grow your business all at once. Although everybody knows this, nobody showed you what to do. Well, Podcast Nation is ready to do all the heavy lifting for you while you just deliver your message and grow. Join the nation and start your podcast today. Text podcast to 929-244-4323 and make them hear your voice.
Do you hear what I hear? That's the sound of your tribe, your audience, your people. That's the sound of your nation. The people who love to hear the sound of your voice as you bring your special message to them in your very own podcast. How do you get it to them? Let us handle that. We're Podcast Nation, and we make sure they hear your voice. Podcast Nation is a full-service podcasting firm that does all the hard work for you so you can be the talent and get your message to your people. Just text podcast to 929-244-4323 and talk to one of our staff on how you can get started with your very own done-for-you podcast. Or just go to podcastnation.com and get started today. That's PODCAST nation.com. Your people are waiting on you. Make them hear your voice. Podcast Nation.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Productive Podcaster. This is going to be a fun interview for me. It's fun because it's always fun when you can interview someone that you got love for. I got love for this person. Now, it ain't the kind of love y'all think about. It's a love because we both are graduates of the prestigious Hampton University. This is my classmate, Monique A.J.Smith, coming to the show. Monique, welcome to the Productive Podcaster. How you doing?
Hey, Hampton Hugs.
Hampton Hugs, my dear. Hampton Hugs to you. Some of you are looking at us like, what are you talking about? Well, we're a very close-knit community at Hampton University. And so we Monique and I, see, here's the thing. This is not just, two people that went to the same college. We're two people in the same major, two people in the sports department. And so we got history. We've got history. And it's so much fun. It's so funny is that you and I, we have been out of touch for decades, but a few years ago, we got back in touch with each other, and we're sharing the same speaking platforms. I mean, across the country, sharing the same speaking platform. We run into each other at airports. I mean, it's just funny how to come to find out she knows, like, not just one of my best friends who also went to Hampton, but she knows one of my neighbors who she's had on her podcast. So it's a unique relationship. So that's why I say I got love for this lady right here. So I'm very, very happy to have you here on the Productive Podcast. And now, Monique, your podcast, A Chat in the Garden. Tell us how you came up with that.
Oh, that's interesting because many people don't understand why I call it Chat in the Garden, even though it's about athletics. So I'm a person who pours into other people. I plant seeds of empowerment to lead others to greatness. So the part of athletic administration that I enjoy the most is professional development. And when I would help other individuals get their jobs, after they get the jobs, they would just be grumbling, so-and-so don't like me. I can't get this. I hate it here. And I'm like, they don't realize that after you get the job, it's going to be some growth. And growth means being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So, same thing I would say when I was in a conference office giving advice to the membership. I kind of created something. It's like disruptive messaging. You don't know that you're getting the message, while you're getting the message. And so when I say it's going to take growth, it's going to take nurturing, it's going to take pruning, take all 4 seasons for you to be successful in athletic administration. That's why I call it Chat in the Garden, because everybody knows that I plant seeds. Others to greatness, not myself, but to others. And I have several men and women that I have mentored over the years.
That's great. I love that. Now, and you heard her mention just a second ago about, sports. I want to give you a little background on this because I don't want to undersell who we have on the show today. She's had several positions in intercollegiate sports. I mean, so sports information director, athletic director, associate commissioner for the CIAA conference, which is what we started at Hampton. And we're now, I think, in the Big South now. But we've moved and moved and moved. But Monique, she's also the CEO of a company, Seeds of Empowerment LLC, a consulting company, and she's had several positions. Now, what she has done is she has helped a lot of people in athletic administration. And she still works to do that with her podcast. Now, she has been helping so many people and interviewing people and just inspiring people, especially women. And that is something that is an underserved community when we're talking about the women in sports. And a lot of the women are African American in sports. So these are underserved people who need to be recognized and lifted up and said, hey, we see you, we recognize you, we appreciate you, we respect you. And I'm so glad that you are able to do that. And like I said, I love what you do, because like you've interviewed some people that I actually know, and I'm like, this is cool. I love it. So tell us how you got started doing a podcast on this.
Well, it's by fluke, be honest with you. So it was. It was not planned. I began full-time entrepreneurship in 2013, and I was getting speaking engagements locally in the Tidewater area, and there was this publicist, and she said, "I have a client who wants to have the longest podcast, and would you like to be on it? Or do you want to be a host, or do you want to be a guest?" And I said, well, I have control issues. I'll be the host. And so I began to be the host. Well, honestly, it was the most unprofessional podcast I ever heard, because I had a mindset of what I was trying to do, hippie hop kind of thing. I was like, okay, he don't get it. And then he didn't even record it, so I couldn't really use it. So my publicist was her name is Nikki Curry, the best publicist ever. And she was like, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, you can't control everything. So then like 3 months later, she says, I have another one for you. I said, yeah, right. She says, no. This is professional. You're going to really love this. His name is Clark Garrison. He has a network, Survival Radio Network. Just talk to him. I said, okay. Now, he didn't know I had a background. You and I majored in mass media at Hampton University. We were trained in all areas: television, radio, magazines, newspaper, PR, all of that. So, hey, I had Davita Plummer, who's now the dean of the school that we came from. She was my teacher in radio. So I knew how to do a rundown sheet. I knew where to put my I just knew how to run my own thing. So when I did it, he was so impressed. And he was like, yeah, I majored in this. And so I knew exactly how I wanted it done. And so I told him, I said, I want to interview only African-American female athletic administrators. And so I said, my goal is to highlight them. So my interest was not to be on YouTube, iTunes. You see, I don't even no, I wasn't trying to grow my masses. I was trying to elevate the women in athletic administration to the community that we have, so there was something they can play over and over and over again. So that was my goal. And I still get people say, well, why don't you do this? I said, because I'm trying to draw everybody to the Facebook group so then everybody can network and know each other. So I had a different business plan. Yeah. So, and then he loved it. Oh, he wouldn't let anybody else engineer our show. He just loved all the guests we had. And so we started, and we did, and then got to February, I had only ADs. And then I started going to the lieutenants, like the associate ADs and people like that. And he was like, oh, I see what you mean. And so that's how I began. That was 6 years ago.
Now, that you brought up something I want to touch on. How important for someone who wants to start a podcast is it to have their market narrowed down to the point where no matter what people want to suggest you do, that you stick to your guns?
Well, hey, Barry, I mean, sticking to my guns has been me since day one. I mean, that's just me. Call it stubborn or whatever. When I know what I know, I mean, I can be influenced if you can educate me.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew exactly where I was going. And it's so interesting because now people say you need to niche. Before I was like, oh no, you don't narrow yourself down. Now everybody's saying, yeah, niche marketing is it, which I was already there.
Right. Now, and how long have you been doing your show?
6 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
6 years.
August will begin the 7th season.
And as I mentioned earlier, you interviewed one of my good friends, Britt King. And
oh, okay.
Yes. Britt and I literally, I mean, we grew up probably 100 yards from each other.
Okay.
That's what I say. We were right around the corner from one another. We grew up and Britt, as you know, has had a lot of success in women's basketball. And so it was cool when I knew she was going to be on the show. I was like, that's my girl. So it was cool to see that. And I'm just like, I love how things come full circle with people in your life. And those 6 degrees of separation. Mine are probably like 3. But I'm glad to see that. Now, who would you say is probably the most interesting interview that you had, or the one that you really were excited about the most?
Oh, that's not fair.
Okay, you want to give me a few?
Well, let's put it like this. So I have, we just had a big celebration last night. Yeah. And Britt was there. And we usually do it at NACTA, which is the National Convention for Athletic Administrators with different umbrellas.
Mm-hmm.
And so since we did not go to Las Vegas, we did it virtually. And what I do every year, I acknowledge the #1 show of the previous season. So I call it the Deb Award, named after Deborah in the Bible, who gave the most advice under a tree. Mm-hmm. So the tree is the garden. So
gotcha.
Every year I get the Deb Award. And so we've been celebrating previous winners. And so, and then last night we acknowledged the person from season 5. And so we've had some, you have to understand the people that are in my group are not necessarily fans, okay?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
These are people who want to know how to navigate this career piece. And so they have different kind of questions versus how does it feel to be a SID for Michael Jordan? It's not that kind of show.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I will say this year I had a young lady that had 2 outstanding stars that she was working with. And so how do you navigate that? How you stay professional? But I will say that the top podcasts have been high-level individuals that have moved up. So Dr. Renee Miles was the first individual with the most listened to podcast. And interesting enough, she now is at University of Miami. And so when she was on the show 5 years ago, to the almost everybody who's been a Deb Award winner has elevated, has moved up. I have another young lady who started out on my show as an AD, but now she's chief of staff of a university. So it's planting seeds that, if you really want to run an athletic department, you might want to be provost, or you might want to be chief of staff, or you might want to be president. So it's planting those kind of seeds. But I will tell you, I had, what is that young lady that I'm having, oh my gosh, Tiffany Green.
Mm-hmm.
She's on my show tomorrow.
Wow.
She's an HBCU grad. I'm really excited about having her on because I watched her in action because she's in the box. She's doing play-by-play.
Yeah.
That's impressive. And she comes from my roots, HBCU roots. And
so, that's why I started, madam. HBCU in the box calling the game. So that's a lot of fun. Now, I wanna ask you, as far as your guests, because you get a lot of great guests.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do you ever run into any challenges booking guests? Because a lot of people out there want to do interview shows, but getting guests can be a challenge.
Well, not really. I'm booked to January now.
Wow. And just so you guys know, we're recording this right now. It is the beginning of June. So that's impressive.
Thank you. Everybody's excited about being on the show. I mean, when I travel to other things, it's like, oh, you the chat lady? Are you the host? Yeah, that's me. And so I try to reward them as well, but because it takes, I mean, the whole point is that if you listen to someone and then you reach out and say, I heard your interview and I like to follow up on this. It's supposed to be the bridge in this career piece. Because that's all we really talk. We don't talk about, necessarily, again, controversial things unless it is helping them elevate. Because like I say, if you can bring something new to the department, that helps elevate you. You know?
Like that.
Oh yeah, that's definitely
bring something new to the environment that helps elevate. I love that. I love that. That's a tweetable right there. So
diversity is about. That's the whole point about diversity. If you think about diversity as green, meaning you're going to elevate your department by having diversity of thought, because it's going to be the young minds that figure out how we're going to navigate when we come back to university. I tell them right now, I said, look, I was already using Zoom because I travel, so I would teach my class. I teach at Hampton University. I teach sports management courses, and so I said, you have got to come out of it. Everybody wants diversity of thought. I said, embrace that.
So, one last question before we let you go. Now, you've been doing this for 6 years now. What would you say is the biggest difference from when you started 6 years ago to where you are now?
I have sponsors.
Hey, all right. I love that. She has sponsors. So real quick, talk about that.
Well, you have to find people who have value in what you provide, and that's just it. The first sponsor I had was Winston-Salem State. And they had a new AD, and she wanted to, because the key is, to play it while the person is on there. And so it was, we see red. And so I was able to promote that because the key was they had this rotating flyer. Okay. Yeah. Fast forward, I have Tawana Smith, who has this book called Surviving the Lights, a Professional Athlete's Playbook to Avoiding the Curse. All right. So she became a media partner. So this beyond, partner with me here, I began to help her find speaking engagements. So return on investment, I gave her a book to one of my NFL speakers, one of my guests. She loved it and she bought it for all of the Celebration Bowl attendees. Talk about return on investment. That's nice. I love it. So Monique, tell everyone the name of your podcast again and where they can find you. Okay, well, the name of the podcast is A Chat in the Garden. You can go chatinthegarden.com to find how to listen to it. I like to communicate with people on LinkedIn, so you can find me at Monique A.J.Smith. And my Facebook group is A Chat in the Garden. All right. Well, Monique, we appreciate you chatting with us in our garden over here at the Productive Podcaster. Thank you so much. You're always welcome on any platform I got because we got Hampton Love. I appreciate you for that, and thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks, Barrett.
You've heard the rumblings. You even thought about starting your own. But how? Everybody knows podcasting is the fastest and best way to get your message out and grow your business all at once. Although everybody knows this, nobody showed you what to do. Well, Podcast Nation is ready to do all the heavy lifting for you while you just deliver your message and grow. Join the nation and start your podcast today. Text podcast to 929-244-4323 and make them hear your voice.
Do you hear what I hear? That's the sound of your tribe, your audience, your people. That's the sound of your nation. The people who love to hear the sound of your voice as you bring your special message to them in your very own podcast. How do you get it to them? Let us handle that. We're Podcast Nation. and we make sure they hear your voice. Podcast Nation is a full-service podcasting firm that does all of the hard work for you so that you can be the talent and get your message to your people. Just text podcast to 929-244-4323 and talk to one of our staff on how you can get started with your very own done-for-you podcast. Or go to podcastnation.com and get started today. That's PODCAST nation.com. Your people are waiting on you. Make them hear your voice. Podcast Nation.
Okay, we're back. We're back, and I'm excited. I'm excited because I just enjoyed. I had a great time talking to my friend. I mean, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. It was fun for me talking to a fellow classmate, a good friend of mine. So I was just happy to have her on. Thank you, Monique, for being a part of the show. I'm excited still because it's time for PodQuest.
PodQuest.
PodQuest is that time where you, the audience members, get to ask questions from some of our previous guests, rather. Well, the question today was for our guest, Kristen Espinar. Kristen, the question is, were you afraid no one would be interested in your topic? Well, if you don't remember, Kristen works with people teaching them English who are in other countries who need to learn English. And, you know, sometimes that doesn't seem like the quote unquote sexy topic. Man, I learned a lot from her. I learned so much from her. But it may not seem like the sexy topic. It may not seem like something that's exciting. But who cares about exciting when people want to learn something? Understand, your podcast can be educational. It can be informative. It can be entertaining. It can be all those things in one. But you need to know your audience. And one of the things Kristen pointed out when we asked her this question was she was a little nervous at first, but she realized that there were people who were interested in her topic. And the more she realized that, the more she realized that she had to be their voice. And she got more into it. She got her message out there to them, and more people were interested in this topic. So to you, the podcaster or the potential podcaster who asked the question, I say to you, first, as Kristen said, know your audience. Know your audience. Find out who they are. Find out what they're interested in. Look at things that they go into some pages and find out what they do, who they listen to, what topics, what questions they have. Then cater yourself around that. As long as you're doing something you love, there's someone else on this earth that loves what you do. Don't limit your thinking to your circle of friends. Don't limit your thinking to just your family. Don't limit your thinking to your community. Don't limit your thinking to your state. There are people all around the world who would be interested in what you do as a podcaster. Find out who they are and then cater to them. Now, we're moving on with the show to our podcast profile. Our podcast profile is featuring Oshenta Podcast. Oshenta Podcast. I got a chance to talk to this lady a while ago, Lori, who deals with Oshenta Podcasting. Her podcast actually is gone all over the world. They actually do soap operas, guys. How'd you like to hear a soap opera on a podcast? It goes all over the world. You can listen to a podcast going all over the world. Isn't that wonderful? And you can actually have yours go all over the world. But they do a soap opera. Isn't that cool? Oshenta, I recommend that you guys check that out. So, guys, now it's time for one of my favorite parts of the show. You all know what it is. It's the giveaway. I love the giveaway. This one goes out to Mel George. Mel George has subscribed to The Productive Podcaster, and he has also shared The Productive Podcast with people. He even let us know how many he shared it with. Thank you, Mel, for doing that. What you're going to get is our podcasting checklist, so you know everything you need to do to get your own podcast and do it right. We'll have a checklist for you, so you have everything on point for you. Thank you, Mel George, for being a part of The Productive Podcaster. tribe and sharing it. And I urge you guys, if you want to be a part of the giveaway, all you have to do is join the tribe, subscribe, and then send it out and share it to people. Let everyone know to join the Productive Podcaster. Now, time for another part of the show that I love so much, and that is the productivity quote. I love this part because we want to make sure you are productive in your podcasting as well. Well, this quote comes from, and I hope I can pronounce the name right, Adowu Koyenekan. Oh yeah, Koyenekan. Adowu Koyenekan. And he wrote the book, Wealth for All, Living a Life of Success at the Stage of Your Ability. Ooh, I love that title. He said, where your attention goes, your time goes. Where your attention goes, your time goes. So I want you to think about that for a second. You all want to be productive podcasters, but are you putting your attention into it? Are you focusing on making that podcast do what it's supposed to do what you said you wanted it to do from the get-go? Where your attention goes, your time goes. Because if you're not putting in the time to do that, that shows that your attention is elsewhere. If you're not putting in the time to make your podcast be successful, to be productive, then your attention is elsewhere. You need to reel in your potential and make your attention and make it do what it's supposed to do to build your podcast. So that today, guys, is your productivity quote. Thank you guys for joining us once again on the Productive Podcaster. I'm Dr. Barrett Matthews, and I want to tell you one more time, keep sharing it. I appreciate you guys so much. Keep letting everyone know what we're doing here, and we want to help you be a productive podcaster and hopefully showcase you here on the show as well. So thank you once again for joining us. See you guys next time. Thank you for joining us on the Productive Podcaster. Be sure to join us next time for another great show. We welcome your engagement, so make sure you participate by joining the Productive Podcaster Facebook group and chime in. Also, share the Productive Podcaster with some of your friends right now. If you have a podcast and you're looking for guests, or if you would like to be a guest on a podcast, join our podcast exchange at www.podcastworlddirectory.com. We'll see you next time.